Hey, welcome back for another video. In this one, we're going to get into executive protection, more specifically, the protection of them personally. There was a lot of cases throughout 2025, whether it was political violence, the assassination of high-profile individuals, the assassination of business leaders, political figures, the like. What we're noticing is that this is an increasing trend, and if you haven't been asked the question already of how do we deal with this in the workplace, maybe you're a security leader, maybe you're just getting tasked with these kinds of issues, and you want to look over or look after the safety and security of your executive. That's what we're going to get into this video, so stay tuned. So team, there's a lot of things out there as it relates to executive protection, right? The protective intelligence piece, threat management considerations, the close protection aspect, actually having a team with them when they travel around the world or maybe domestically. What would y'all say about the personal aspect of this, where that's kind of our space in this, right? Making sure that the executive themselves have ownership.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest falsities in this space is that they have their protection team, right? And so they rely so heavy on their protection team that when they are not around, they are also not being aware, observant, taking that on themselves. So I think that's one of the biggest, inadequacies in this space that I see. And I know we talk about it a lot is getting down to that individual and getting them the skills. I think that's equally as important, if not more, for the executive team, for sure.
I think too, a lot of them probably try to fly under the radar, right? They don't want to be walking around with the big team, introducing or just making it known that they're a high profile person, executive. They're worth a lot of money. Maybe they're, whatever organization, healthcare or something like that, whatever organization they represent, there's going to be some people out there that have some disagreements with them, but they want to fly under the radar. They don't want to bring that attention to them. I think it's important for them to understand too, that maybe there's lots of different types of executive protection. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to have 6 bodyguards walking around you all the time. There's a little bit more, there's other executive protections out there where your EP team isn't even seen. There might be one guy with the executive, but the other folks are kind of in the background, kind of blending in a little bit. So it doesn't seem quite so obvious. I think one unfortunate part with executive protection is it seems to come and go, right? Anytime there's an executive that's been killed or assassinated, whatever that is, then it becomes a hot topic for a while. But then unfortunately it kind of fades away until it happens again, realizing like, okay, it's not something that's in the news. It's not something that's happening right now. It's not something I need to worry about. Well, until it is. And then it happens, and then it becomes the news cycle for 12 months. Like, that's what we're coming up on now. And it becomes back in. But knowing like this is a threat no matter what, and it's something I need to deal with, I need to be prepared for, it's beneficial to have that executive protection team.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even helping them understand the vulnerability, right? I mean, one of the things we've seen over the past several months is that they're feeling vulnerable. They're feeling exposed. But on the flip side of the coin, it feels awkward to have somebody following you all the time or kind of encroaching on what feels like your personal space and your personal life, whether that relates to maybe they have to have the family have some coverage as well, whatever that is. But when we can share the proactivity piece that we emphasize over and over, even when we're working with the general population in the workplace, it's the same thing for executives, right? It's like if a threat is identified, there's those behaviors that we can identify ahead of time. If we can get in front of those and just recognizing that, look, even if we can identify those things, we can have maybe a multidisciplinary threat management team look into those issues, evaluate that circumstance, put it on the hierarchy of levels of concern, and then it kind of changes like you're talking about. Maybe they don't for a certain trip have to have folks with them, maybe they do, but at least there's a process to identify what makes sense for the situation based upon the threat, based upon the considerations at hand, and allowing them to have that confidence regardless of what they're doing, regardless of where they're going.
That's a great point. There's a specific process that is done to evaluate threats from every angle, because even to the point where like maybe it's not necessarily even at their work, because they might even be a threat. There might even be a threat to them at their home, right? And it comes a point in time where, the discussion for the last year has been a little bit of, all right, do high-level executives even put their face on the website? what information is on the website about an executive team? Like, yes, to a point, like an organization wants to have a face to the organization, but also makes him a target. So does that make his family a target also? Because then it becomes workplace violence in a little bit more broader terms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's definitely something that has been talked about quite a bit lately.
Yeah, no doubt. What are some of the things that when we get the opportunity to engage these folks, what should they be trained on? What do we want to educate them on?
Well, they're so focused on having the highest level of training for their teams, but including them in on that training is equally as important. We just did some high-level, high-risk travel training for a very large organization. And as we're training the team on what to say, how to say it, depending on what environment they're in, we would pose the question, would that change things if your CEO was sitting right next to you in this environment? And they said, absolutely. And it's like, okay, well, that should also be practiced. That should also be an important part of the training because it's a very likely consideration. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I mean, and also I think to that point, it's like we focus so much on the CEO, but I was working with an organization and the security team was very concerned because the CEO's kids were very active on social media. In particular, very vocal about political views and opinions and hot topics. So how important do you think the social media presence is to, the threats or perceived threats that could come their way?
Oh, it's huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not forecasting where you're going, keeping things in the settings, your privacy settings in tune. Because here's the thing, right? Is it going to be the CEO or the executive actually managing their own social media? Probably not.
Right.
So having the conversation with the people that are, so it's like, hey, we're going to this conference, and then, people know 3, 4, 5 days in advance before they even get there. So having the conversations with the people that need to be part of those conversations. And it's just sometimes generating that awareness because you don't know what you don't know. So it doesn't have to be laborious by any means, but just giving them that capability to understand how to not create more vulnerability than, what it already might be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And then even to the great points brought up too, it's not necessarily even just them. It could be their family that's the target too, right? And just having that online presence, understand the family. And even though you're not necessarily like posting exactly where you're at, well, maybe your family is too, but a good amount of education needs to be brought. And they're busy people, right? They have large multi-million-dollar, billion-dollar companies that they're running all the time. And to be able to pull them back in, like, actually you need to bring some awareness training to you, not just your people. Like, we need to teach you the things that you need to keep in consideration when you're moving around, when you're traveling, when you're going to conferences, when you're going to business meetings, all these different things. What it might happen right outside the street, in New York City is where, he ended up getting assassinated at. And they're not necessarily thinking about that. So definitely it's hard to get those people in a room and teach them stuff, but they definitely need that knowledge and information awareness.
I'm kind of curious what you guys think about, as a CEO or executive, kind of travels throughout his normal life. Where do you think some of the biggest risks are or biggest vulnerabilities are, as he or she goes through their day-to-day?
Well, now it's recently some of these nihilistic threats that we're seeing, right? That's kind of the increasing trend where, somebody takes on a grievance, somebody makes a threat, and they're doing so from the perspective of, it may not even necessarily be to that specific individual, but because of what they represent. This is like the Luigi Mangione assassination of Brian Thompson. For those of you that don't know, the UHC CEO back in 2024, Luigi Mangione assassinated Brian Thompson in New York City. Absolute tragedy, but he's doing it based upon his feelings of what he sees within the insurance industry as a whole. It wasn't necessarily specifically Brian Thompson. He just ended up targeting Brian Thompson because of the whole picture that he represents. And he was very targeted. It was very intentional. He had a manifesto. So all of these different things are precursors that we might be able to identify to these different circumstances. But there it is, right? There's going to be something there. Oftentimes, almost always, people don't snap. There's these warning signs there, if not always, right? There's the behaviors, there's the progression. It's that pathway to targeted intentional violence. And so it's that recognition of, like, if we can see these things ahead of time and just have a process to give ourselves that opportunity to prepare, that can make all the difference. So that's kind of one of the trends I'm seeing.
Yeah, and specifically with that case, and we're seeing this trending a lot, is this awareness has gotten out to the public, right? This pathway to violence, and see something, say something. And we would hear that all the time, but it's like, what are you supposed to see? Who are you supposed to say it to? And I feel like that awareness is getting out. We saw that with that situation, what was it, October 20th or somewhere right around there, where that individual traveled to the Atlanta airport. And it was the family in that environment that, was like, something's just not right here. I guess he live streamed on the way to the airport and said somebody's going to get hurt or something to that effect. I'm paraphrasing, but, and the family's like, something's just not right. So they actually turned that into authorities, and then come to find out he had a loaded, AR-15 in his vehicle, and he was out doing surveillance in one of these terminals. So yeah, but back to, the case with UHG, I mean, were there those warning signs in hindsight, right? When he became isolated and stuck to himself, and, all of these, very textbook, indicators that somebody might be on this pathway. So what do you think in these situations people should do about it, or who do you speak up to? What do you say in these situations?
So oftentimes when I have the opportunity to work with folks on this, some of our clients, it's a couple different things. One, it's recognizing that if they're working with us, we're going to be building their threat management team, their multidisciplinary threat management team. That threat management team is absolutely trained and qualified to be able to address these threats when they're identified. You got to have the identification piece, and being able to get ahead of that different potential threat that may be out there. But having that threat management team in place, trained and looking after these different issues. Then the other thing is there is no replacement for educating the executive themselves. Now, are we going to be able to get in front of them every single time and do a full course, like take them through a high-risk course or whatever? No, we're not. But within the confines of what we have, given them as much information to generate that buy-in from them. I remember one brief story. When I moved to Washington, D.C. back in 2015, there was a huge story about a CEO and his family. They were taken hostage in their own home. He was a very high-level CEO. Taken hostage in his own home. They were duct taped and bound in their home, and the home ended up getting burned down, and they couldn't escape. They couldn't get out of the restraints, but they ended up getting killed in their own home, and that was a tragedy there, and that had shockwaves across the entire DC metro area. And I just remembered feeling the profoundness of that case, because the executive needs to know they're a person too. Because of what they do, there's just that elevated risk of them going about their life because of the profile they have. They need to know those skill sets, because we know you can do things about being restrained. You can do things about surviving a hostage situation. We know what you can do in all of those circumstances. And so giving them the ability to navigate those, or at least be prepared for that stuff, is all of the importance. So any last comments from y'all on that?
It's such a good point. I think just kind of broadly saying, like, education needs to happen, training needs to happen at every single level of an organization, and tailor it specifically to that layer of the organization. Awareness training all the way up to executives. And maybe if they are a high risk, maybe that's or a high priority target, maybe that's something that you look at. Like, maybe you actually do need to do some of that training, as far as like escape training, stuff like that. Maybe not super realistic, but there are going to be some situations where that could be very beneficial. But training at every level, tailor it to every level, and make sure it happens. It's interesting, like from a leadership perspective, is like there's the expectation of a leader of an organization. He has the expectation, she has the expectation of their team members or employees to go through and have some awareness training. Well, we're going to create a culture of that you need to receive some training yourself. Mm-hmm. I think it's extremely important.
Yeah, helping them develop that ownership. I mean, it couldn't be any more important. But anyway, thanks for the input, team. Y'all are rock stars. Cut that one. Line. Just kidding. Anyway, thanks for joining with this video. Smash the subscribe button. We love when you come back for more, and hopefully you're getting the value out of these that you're looking for. But if not, put something in the comments so we know exactly what you want to hear from us on. Go to CPPS.com if you want to chat with us, reach out to us, subscribe to our newsletter, The Centerfold, and we'll have this content to you on a regular basis. Thanks for coming. Till next time, cheers.